Yet another poor start ends poorly for the Arizona Coyotes as they take a 3-2 loss to the San Jose Sharks in San Jose. We're going to talk about this game, break it down, see what we all thought on this episode of Locked On Coyotes. Plus, we're going to take a look at some roster news, anything going on with the Arizona Coyotes, all on today's episode.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlak right beside me on today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. We got a great show for you guys on today's episode. We are breaking down the Arizona Coyotes 3-2 loss to the San Jose Sharks, plus get some roster news in there, of course. But let's take a look at this, this loss to the Sharks, Carl. And we can really pretty much pin this down to a poor start because 2 goals in 5 minutes from San Jose essentially is what made this game what it was.
Definitely. Tomas Hertl and Nick Bonino scored in the first 5 minutes. In the preview, we talked a lot about Hertl. Didn't talk as much about Bonino. But yeah, definitely a slow start. Coyotes couldn't really recover, which is funny because I think we all thought it was going to be like another high-scoring affair.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up being relatively low-key.
Yeah, it ended up being just under. Ended up being 5 goals total, I think. I even tweeted right as the game started. I'm like, oh yeah, no, picking the over in this game seems like a no-brainer. But I was wrong, and hockey happens. Hockey, I think a lot of us probably had that thought. If you look at analytics and trends and the way things go, it had the recipe for a high scoring game. But then you have to factor in the goaltenders, right?
Yeah.
And obviously we'll highlight Arizona's goaltender. Yeah, 3 goals scored against on Karel Vejmelka, but still, like Karel Vejmelka still had himself a nice freaking game.
Yeah, pretty solid. The thing is, when we're talking about bad teams, the analytics can only tell you so much because, like, 2 bad teams playing each other, weird stuff tends to happen. Like, they either get to be, like, an offensively deficit team like the Coyotes end up scoring a lot of goals. Or just, like, both teams kind of, like, simplify everything, shut it down. You get a traditional 3-2 game. Like, there's no real way to tell what it's going to be. I was glad to see the Coyotes get a rare power play goal, though. Started off the scoring with Lawson Crouse getting his 13th of the season. Late in the period on the power play, like, we need more, like, Coyotes finishing period strong. We need more power play. We need more Lawson Crouse goals.
Let's just talk about Lawson Crouse for a minute because, you tweeted it out about. I mean, like a little bit. I think a lot of people have been tweeting about Lawson Crouse last night, right? Just about you look at how he played, 2 years ago, last year under Rick Tocchet, where he was completely snake bitten versus these last 2 years, this season and last season. It has been a night and day difference of Lawson Crouse.
Yeah. I think the thing that best kind of illustrates that is in the 2020-2021 season, Crouse had 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points in 51 games. This season in 26 games, he has 13 goals. Someone pointed out the fact that, was Tocchet being the coach part of the issue for that? And I do think that there is definitely some aspect of that. But I think Krause has done a lot of good work to improve his game. He is making sure that he is earning the ice time now. Um, had a good season last year, ended unfortunately a little bit too early with injuries, but he looks ready to go, and he is certainly proving anyone who thought he was being overpaid wrong.
Oh yeah, right. No, that's that's one of the big ones. Is I really do think that coaching made a difference, but I think it wasn't the difference, right?
Yeah,
So I'm with you on that. Like I think he definitely worked. Like he definitely saw what happened in that that COVID shortened year, that half season that started in January, which is really weird, and to see how he kind of took that up and they made it an opportunity. And when we looked at it last year, right, you said every player had something to prove. Lawson Crouse was one of them, and he proved it last season. And this season, he's just on another resurgence, kind of on an additional sense, proving that he is worth the contract that he was just paid.
yeah, which is a good thing to see, not necessarily something that you do always see, because there are definitely players who, get that contract and then immediately kind of stumble out the gate. You know, you usually expect a player to play their best in the year prior to getting signed, so that way they get a lot more money. Kraus is kind of going, you know, he did really well last year, but he's just building off of that. Which is good. He's not taking a step back. He's continuing to improve. Um, yeah, it's been just wonderful to see Kraus, a player who I think Bill Armstrong would love to have just the entire team be Lawson Krause's.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Especially this his overall play style. Um, no, gotta love him as a solid power forward out there.
Yeah, just big but skilled. And when you look at who was drafted last draft, it's a lot of that. It's Logan Cooley and then big and hopefully skilled.
Yeah, which is the funny thing, just seeing that difference. I mean, like, um, but I mean that is the Bill Armstrong way. I think also the Tourney way, because I think Tourney also kind of likes those kind of type of players too, which makes
Yeah.
sense because why would you get a coach that doesn't fall into that system? Um, but
Yeah, most GMs aren't getting a coach who immediately is like, I don't like any of your players. This isn't how that normally happens, but Cross is getting some good utilization. Looks like Keller and Gostisbehere assisted on his goal, which is always nice. The other goal, should point out, Nick Bukestad.
yeah, Nick Bukestad having another uh, great like great year, great showing, kind of like having probably one of his better years at this point in his career. Like he had a pretty poor last couple years and he's getting himself a resurgence on his own.
Yeah. So his best year was 2014-15 in Florida, 24 goals in 72 games.
Hmm.
Also set career highs in points with 43. This season, 27 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points. He has tied multiple seasons already or exceeded him. So if he can keep this up, which may not be the case, he's shooting pretty high, but just continue to be a good 5-on-5 player, like that'll be enough, especially for a player who's on such a cheap deal.
Oh yeah, right. Like that's um, and I think that goes alongside the idea what I was just saying with Kraus, right? Players are trying to prove their worth. They're getting the opportunity with the Coyotes because we know what the Coyotes are. Yes, they're a better team than last year, but um, or maybe there are worse teams than the Coyotes were.
That sounds better.
Yeah, that's a because the Blackhawks and the Ducks are another level of bad. Um, but yes,
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the Coyotes play. And there's definitely bright spots. I think the fact that they have less dead weight contracts. I don't want to say that because they do add, experience and good in the room and all of those kind of intangible stuff. But the Coyotes last season had a lot of players who were signed to deals that were very high, that were just not good on the ice anymore. And there's less of that now. So it is kind of interesting to see the change.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we're seeing the rebuild happen as it, like as it actually happens. We're seeing everything move forward in that way, which is pretty cool. But we're gonna go and actually continue to talk about that. Kind of, how we like, what we think about the Coyotes at this point, and what we're gonna take away from this loss to the San Jose Sharks. Plus, get some roster news on this episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. It's where you can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball, the World Cup, and hockey, they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which of course you do, you're listening to a sports podcast, you can find those at BetOnline as well. It's the fastest and easiest way to get all of your betting information. You can head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts.
So let's take some of the things that we can move away from this game, and kind of like, that we can take away from this game, and kind of apply it to the idea what we're talking about this season. Because, like, yeah, it was a bad, it was this, the same problems for the Coyotes, right? They ran into the same problems as every other game: a bad start, you got penalties, you got it all. I mean, they did get a 5-on-3 power play goal, but I mean, like, if you're not scoring a 5-on-3 power play goal, you got some problems.
To be fair, teams don't really practice the 5-on-3. There are definitely situations where I've seen like good 5-on-3s that just don't score. The Coyotes did score though, so it was nice to see them hit that low bar.
Absolutely. But, you know, it's interesting to see what, like, what it really is when we see two bad teams up against each other. And kind of, you really take it really puts you to the idea of highlighting those good players. And we talked about that in the pregame show, right? It was like, okay, we're gonna really put all our focus onto Jacob Chikrin, or on the Shark side, like Timo Meyer or Erik Karlsson, because, like, it's like, okay, these guys are the ones that are gonna be making the moves, and it's gonna be like, okay, like, we know these teams are bad, so what are their values gonna be now? We know, like, what moves is this team gonna do depending on what happens in this game.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the Sharks did a better job at shutting down the Coyotes than the other way around. They won, of course, which is always good. But if you look, Keller has an assist on the power play goal. No, nothing 5-on-5. Schmaltz was held off the score sheet, as was McBain, of course. Krause's goal was on the power play again, which is that. Um, Only 1 point by a defenseman, Gostisbehere, you guessed it, on the power play. Actually, I lied. Nemeth also got one, but not who you would expect to see. And, on the Shark side, Carlson got a goal. Meyer didn't, but Hurdle did. I think they did a better job at kind of getting their players out there.
Yeah, and like, that also kind of gets us in the idea too of the conversation that we're having. A team that has admitted they're rebuilding, the Coyotes, and a team that hasn't admitted it and won't admit it, and is just like, we'll just be bad, but see what happens.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is certainly a way to go. Looks like the only player who had a multi-point night was Nick Bonino, which I'm not sure if you're San Jose, you want that from your 34-year-old. Like you want the younger guys to be having those big nights. I am lying again because Scott Harrington also had 2 assists. But again, it's interesting to see how the two teams dealt with each other.
Right. And I like the I'm gonna go pull some stuff from our pregame episode with Locked On Sharks. Is the using that term like the fight for Fantilli, because looking at that idea that it was a tank battle made it a little more interesting, because I think a lot of people, like, I know there are a lot of Coyotes fans out there who still really want to go for want us to want the Coyotes to go for Connor Bedard. But some have, like, you know what, the Coyotes can be still a somewhat bottom team, but at least play a little more competitive and actually look a little bit better and get the next best guy.
Yeah. There's definitely like a lot of high end prospects at the top of this year's draft. And I do think there's definitely something to the idea that the Coyotes should be going out expecting or wanting to win every game. Not expecting it because that'd be delusional, but wanting that
Yeah.
next step. So I like what they did. I like that they seem to continue to improve. I don't think that there's much use in watching the stands too much and making sure that they're the absolute worst. It's not good for your mental health to do that. Trust me, this is my 3rd rebuild. And B, there's absolutely nothing you can do. If you're like a listener, unless you're on the team or the coaching staff, there is no way that you can affect the outcome of the game.
Right.
So you might as well just, hope for the best and kind of see what happens. Like at least then you get like a little bit of excitement.
Yep. And I think that's the cool thing, right? To see that little bit of excitement. I'll also add this too. There was a tweet last night that pretty much said that, like, who would have thought that at this point in all the Arizona professional sports team seasons, that the Coyotes would be the winningest team right now.
Yeah, which kind of just says a lot about the rest of the sports teams. I think it says more about them than it says about the Coyotes.
Yeah, you're right. But still, you wouldn't have been like, I wouldn't taken that. I would not have taken that bet.
No.
Absolutely not. I would be dumb to have taken that bet at the beginning of the year. It's like, yeah, you know what? I think in mid-December, I think the Coyotes are going to be the best team in Arizona. Like,
I mean, there was a chance that the Coyotes wouldn't even have their like 4th win by this point in the season. They have exceeded my expectations in a lot of ways, in a lot of really good ways. But it's a long season. We're still early. There's going to be plenty of games for the Coyotes to just horribly lose, especially after the trade deadline.
absolutely. Well, we're going to move on from this game and move on from talking about Coyotes tank talk, and we're going to talk a little bit of roster news in just a minute. I do want to thank everyone once again, though, for making Locked On Coyotes your first listen every day. I want to make sure to put you on over to your second listen. Get a huge recommendation to our Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter most, the biggest stories in sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes, with insights that with local experts only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. But let's talk about some roster news. And tell everyone, well, we had, earlier this week that Dysin Mayo was placed on waivers,
Mm-hmm.
and he cleared those waivers. Let's talk about that, and the idea that, okay, he was placed on waivers. Are we surprised? No, I don't think I am. I don't think you are either.
No. Uh, the and I brought this up on the Slack channel. The Coyotes are a team that frequently goes with 7 defensemen, which is
Mhm.
unusual in and of itself. And Dysin Mayo is often not in that. So he is your 8th guy, which is not great. His contract seemed like it would be reasonable. He was getting some major minutes last season. I don't know why the step back has occurred. Um, could be internal competition is just better. I'm not sure. Did you see? I think a Toronto-based athletic writer was like, "Hey, I wonder if they can get a pick to take the contract of Dysin Mayo if he gets sent to the Roadrunners." And I'm like, "That is probably not going to happen. At least not a pick that you would want. Like, what kind of what would you expect to take a player on a $1 million deal? Nah, you can't expect much."
No, you don't. You can't really expect much. People usually just like think too. They go too much into it. Dyson Mayo still even hasn't been reassigned to the Roadrunners at the time of this recording yet. So
Yeah,
like, that's already, that's one thing as it is. I think the Coyotes have 30 days to reassign him now that he's cleared.
that sounds about right. Yeah. It's not something you see too much, so I do not remember the rule offhand. But yeah, this
I
adds
think I
some
remember. I
flexibility.
think I remember it was 30 days because it was around this time a little bit earlier last year when Kyle Cabianco was coming off of an injury and almost instantly gets waived by the Coyotes. No one claims him. He doesn't get sent down. In fact, he actually plays a couple games with the Coyotes. Looks okay. So they keep him up. They don't send him down. Those 30 days pass. And it's like, well, we don't want to waive him again, so we'll just hold on to him. And he just kind of fell flat after that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand why the Coyotes want to hold on to Mayo, even if it's potentially not going to happen, because they know that they're going to be having some major turnovers on their blue line. They know Chikrin's gone. They probably have a good idea that Gostisbehere is gone. Like, you need someone to fill those roles eventually, and like Mayo can kind of slide in for that. It's just a matter of when those deals happen.
Yeah, I also, at the same time, I don't know if I can put my trust into Dyson Mayo to fill that, you know?
Oh, I mean, let me say that. Mosier and Valimaki fill that spot. And then Dyson Mayo fills the spot of whoever fills Mosier and Valimaki's. Like, they're not going to be the number one, or he's not going to be the number
Oh
one
yeah,
guy.
that's not what I'm saying is like I still don't know if I can trust him in you know, of 6 or 7 defensemen for the Coyotes. If one of them's got, like one of either, if Chikrin and got Spiro gone, you have decisions to make on that side. If you still want to stick with your 6 defensemen, 7 defensemen, you want to go down to 6, and also let's also remember Victor Soderstrom is still sitting down there,
Yeah.
and we've talked about it, right? We've talked about how he plays better in the NHL.
Yeah. We definitely have. Uh, it's a lot of calls that I honestly just do not know what to make. Because I do feel at this point the Coyotes are gonna need defensive prospects. Like, they do not have them. Uh, it almost seems like, you figure trade Chikrin for a forward, but they're pretty well stocked with like skill forwards. It almost seems like they should be getting defensive prospects back and just rebuilding this blue line, because I do not think that that is an area where they're strong. Um, but in the meantime, playing Mayo is probably going to lose you a couple games, which they kind of want.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go like too, you know, too like, you know, high up on the rankings because then you lose out on a potential draft position. I mean, because of the lottery, because of how the lottery works, you still get a chance at a top three.
Yeah.
But those chances diminish the more they win games. So maybe that could be what they're going for, but maybe not. Because maybe um, they don't. They look at their forward prospects right now and they're like, you know what? We're comfortable for forward prospects. We're going to look at one of the top defensive prospects in 2023. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what the Coyotes are going down.
I mean, I'm more comfortable with the Coyotes' forward prospects than their defensive prospects.
I mean,
Um,
again, look, we're talking Dylan Gunther, who's now already playing for the team, Logan Cooley, Connor Geeky. I mean, he still has some stuff to do, as shown, but like I think he can potentially build out to be something like mid six winger.
yeah.
I think there's some other really good prospects out there, but
And you still got like veterans like Crouse and Keller. Like you could round out like a pretty good top 6, top 9 for the
oh,
Coyotes.
you can absolutely round out a solid top nine for the Coyotes with who they already have in the system. So, like forwards, I am not concerned about, and that's why, like, yeah, it was great talking about the fight for Fantilli, but also, like, you can take a look at, like, once again the top defensive prospects, and there is a solid, I think, couple in the top 10 prospects in the upcoming draft. And we
Yeah.
talked about how deep it is, so like might as well.
I mean, why not? The Coyotes did well with Jacob Chikrin, who I think looking back we can call like a very talented prospect who was taken like who slipped in the ratings for some reason. He's done well outside of injuries since being drafted. Like they could go with another player like that. They need another player like that because unless Victor Sherstrom is ready to come up and be the guy, I don't know who the Coyotes' future top pairing is. I just don't. Like Mosier and Valimaki, they're fine. I don't see Mosier as a top guy. I don't see Valimaki as a top guy. At this point, I don't see Soderstrom as a top guy.
Yeah, it's the Coyotes need to figure something out to focus on defense. But on that note, any final thoughts you want to give out before we close things off?
Just I wonder because the Coyotes are going to be back home. They're going to play 6 of their last 8 games at home this month. I wonder if that's going to make a difference because the Coyotes definitely played better when they got back to Mullet Arena. They went on the road, they lost. Maybe some home cooking will do them good.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube. And once again, for our local listeners, you can find us on the KPNX 12 News app. You can also interact with us on social media on Facebook, facebook.com/lockedon coyotes, and on Twitter at LO_coyotes. I'm personally at Robyn_Leonio. Carl Pavlak is at Carl Pavlak FFH. Interact with us, ask a question you might have, we might answer right back. We're on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys staying safe out there. Hope you guys staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.